Hey, good morning, guys. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. It's time for day 3 of our devotional series, week 1 of our devotional series. And today, we're going to be jumping into a topic that is pretty fitting for all that's going on in our world. And we're going to talk about a little bit about anxiety. And specifically, we're going to talk about Luke 22 through 34 and Jesus's command or invitation. I think it's an invitation to not be anxious. And we're going to talk a little bit of that today. But I just want to invite you right now, before we jump in and start talking about it, for you guys to read Luke 12:22 through 34. So read that passage, and then we will jump into it. And while you do that, I will brew some coffee. All right, well, welcome back, and hope you guys didn't get too distracted by me making coffee. So let's jump into this passage. This passage talks, the first thing that it says is, and he said to his disciples, so yesterday we talked about Romans 6 and how, what shall we say then, and how talking about what he's about to say is directly related to what he has just said. In the Gospels, there's lots of times where Jesus says something to crowds, he answers the crowd something, and his response is a little confusing. And he goes to his disciples later, or like right after, and his disciples are like, hey, what were you talking about? We don't understand this. So we don't see the disciples respond. We don't see them be like, hey, what are you talking about? But it says, and he said to his disciples. So wasn't saying this to the crowds. He wasn't saying he wasn't saying this to the people who he had said the thing before. He was just saying this to the disciples. And then he says, therefore I tell you, which means he's talking to his disciples about what he just said, and he's going to explain it more clearly to them. It talks about in the Gospels how things were hidden from people, and the Lord and Jesus revealed things to the disciples that he didn't reveal to others. So that's what we're seeing in this 22 through 34. What we're seeing here is Jesus revealing more about what he just talked about and explaining it to them in a greater way. So for some clarity, in the previous section, Jesus addressed a man's questions essentially regarding finances. He comes to Jesus and is like, hey, Jesus, can you tell my older brother to split the inheritance equally with me? And then he responds by talking about how even the richest man doesn't know when he's going to die, storing up riches in the world doesn't actually benefit him, and things like that. So he's addressing earthly inheritance, earthly wealth, and saying that we can't rely on it. Jesus ends the last section by saying this: Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. You don't know when you're gonna die. You don't know. He's saying you don't actually have control over that. And when you die, your money's gonna go to someone else. It's not gonna be yours. And that's where this "don't be anxious" section is addressing. So it's significant that Jesus is addressing this to the disciples and not to the mass crowd that was following him. Specifically, I believe that this message about "don't be anxious," what it's communicating with the fact that it's to the disciples, not to the crowds, means that it's not about hearing good messages. It's not about knowing the scripture. That's not what helps not being anxious. He could have told the crowd this very thing. He could have spoken that to the crowd and they still wouldn't have understood. What it means is this passage is linking overcoming anxiety and not living with anxiety to knowing God, not just knowing about God, not just knowing scripture, but actually knowing who God is. The key, and that's the key to dealing with anxiety that Jesus is talking about here. And it starts with our knowledge of God. This passage, because he's literally telling this to the disciples, this passage is built on the assumption that we already know God. So we need to look to God, know him, and trust him. We don't have control, and we aren't meant to. So don't try and grab the wheel. It's only going to go bad. Pull a Carrie Underwood and cry out, Jesus, take the wheel. Yeah, that was a bad joke. Verses 22 through 28 are primarily about us not having control over our lives. Talks about how we can't even add a single hour to our life. Elsewhere it says how we can't even turn one of the hairs on our head gray. We can color it, but it washes out. You can't permanently change your hair color. It comes back. And it's saying we don't have control. And the imagery in these verses is important. God is giving us two pretty clear images. He has the one with the raven and talking about how the raven doesn't store up food, doesn't store up provisions for the winter, but I always provide for him. I always provide for the raven. How much more will I provide for you? And then he talks about the lilies in the fields. And talks about how, look how beautiful, the fields are with the lilies growing, and how they're more beautiful than what Solomon ever was in all of his glory. These two images show us the depths of what God feels about us. He's saying, I do these things for the birds and for the fields, for the grass. I don't love them. I love you. How much more will I do for you because I care about you? I love you. If I provide for them, I will provide for you. We live in really uncertain times right now. Really uncertain. It's almost 11 o'clock. And there's going to be a new announcement from Manitoba Health about what the new measures are, new cases, all of that stuff. There is constant updates. We're constantly getting stricter rules to follow. We don't know what the world will look like tomorrow. We just don't know. While we don't know these things, we can't control them. The one who does control them, the one who has a say over it all, loves us and will provide for us. And don't be anxious. Don't be anxious means that we're leaning in to the God who provides for us, that we believe and we trust in this man. We believe and trust in God that he will provide for us despite the shaking, despite the craziness of the world. He will provide for us, and he will keep us, and he will be with us. If I'm being honest, this is a really hard season for me. This, virus isn't serious for me personally. I am healthy. If I get it, I can self-quarantine for 14 days, and I'd be fine. But as a lot of you know, my mom is really sick right now. And part of her treatment has caused some lung problems. And there's a very, this would be a very high chance that if she got sick right now, it wouldn't go very well. So this message is real. To not be anxious, to really sit in, do I trust the Lord in this season is really hard. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it sucks. I'm not, my response is usually anger. Just what the heck is with this stupid virus? What the heck is with this? This is garbage. And then sometimes using some colorful language of like, what on earth? Like, this is stupid. I hate this. And part of our response, part of dealing with anxiety is in the midst of that, being like, going to God and understanding that he'll take it. He will take whatever language you want to use, whatever feeling you have, that we can go to the Lord and talk to him about it and express our hurt, express our anger. And it's through that we can deal with anxiety. We can deal with the anxiety of the situation because the Lord wants to listen to us. So then let's just jump back into this verse and how Jesus ends this section. And he ends the section by inviting us to store up treasures in heaven. He says it's God's good pleasure to provide for us. He doesn't do it because he has to, but because he wants to. The Lord actually wants to provide for us, and he will provide for us while we're here. And he's inviting us into living for heaven, living for the time when we're with him in heaven, and storing up heavenly rewards and living to be with Jesus, which means growing our relationship with the Lord so that when we're one day we're with him, we know him in a greater way. He will provide us with that which never grows old, never runs out, keeps us satisfied, happy, and fulfilled forever. That's our hope. That's what we live for, is Jesus. Drawing close to him and trusting that he will keep us satisfied, keep us happy, and keep us fulfilled forever. Hey guys, so I'm not going to give you questions today. Rather, I want you to spend some time in prayer. First, I want you to ask the Lord what elements, what characteristics of God are you not believing, are you not trusting, that are allowing anxiety into your life? 2, ask Jesus where he is in this crisis, in this pandemic. Ask him where he is, what he is doing, and allow him to speak to you about what he is doing during this time. And the third thing I want you to ask him is ask him what he wants to reveal to you about himself today. I think those 3 questions are the key to us understand Jesus and to allow him to take away our anxiety in this time. So thank you so much for jumping in on this video again. Hopefully we'll have some more videos outside. Again, as before, click subscribe, and if you haven't watched previous day's video, check it out here. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys.